world where power silenced truth, one man with nothing risked everything. When a billionaire attacks his pregnant secretary in cold blood, the only person to stand up isn't a lawyer, guard, or friend. It's a single dad janitor who refuses to stay silent. What happens next changes everything. The morning sun gleamed against the towering glass facade of Hendrix Global Headquarters, a monument to wealth, arrogance, and ambition. Its reflection shimmered across the city skyline like a crown of steel and pride, built by one man who believed he owned not only the building, but everyone inside it. Lucas Hendrix, the billionaire CEO, had created an empire out of fear. To his employees, he was not a leader. He was a storm, unpredictable, merciless, and untouchable. The moment his black limousine pulled into the private parking bay, the air inside the offices changed. Conversation stopped. Laughter died. Even the coffee machines seemed to hum more quietly. Inside the marble-floored lobby, workers rushed like ants before a giant's footsteps. Secretaries whispered warnings. "He's here!" Elevator buttons were pressed with trembling fingers. Meetings were rearranged, smiles rehearsed, apologies preloaded. But amidst all this frantic motion was one man who walked calmly, mop and bucket in hand. Ethan Cole, the janitor. Ethan had been working at Hendrix Global for almost 3 years. Nobody knew much about him. He came in early, long before the executives arrived, and stayed late after the last of the polished shoes had clicked out of the building. He was quiet, polite, and invisible, just another figure in the background of the billionaire's world. Yet if anyone cared to notice, there was something noble about the way he moved, a steady patience born from hardship. At 40, Ethan looked older than his years. His eyes carried the weight of someone who had seen too much loss. His late wife, Sarah, had passed away 3 years earlier in a car accident, leaving him alone with their 5-year-old daughter, Lily. Since then, every choice, every breath he took was for her. He often carried a small photo of her in his pocket, a tiny girl with curly brown hair and a smile brighter than any diamond in Lucas Hendrix's vault. "For you, kiddo," he would whisper whenever exhaustion threatened to pull him down. That morning, Ethan's mop glided across the marble tiles in rhythmic strokes. His back ached, but his heart stayed steady. He hummed a tune softly, one his wife used to sing while cooking breakfast. Around him, the world of luxury carried on, oblivious. He didn't resent it. He just existed beside it, quietly watching. Across the hall, Anna Blake, the young secretary of Lucas Hendrix, hurried through the corridor, clutching a thick folder. Her steps were nervous, her face pale. At 27, she had dreams once, dreams of opening her own design studio. But dreams didn't pay bills, and her mother's medical expenses had forced her to take the job at Hendrix Global. She was brilliant, hardworking, and kind, but kindness meant nothing in Lucas's empire. She had learned that the hard way. Lately, her life had grown even more complicated. Beneath her neatly pressed blouse, she hid a gentle curve, a secret that could destroy her career. She was 3 months pregnant. The father, a man who promised love but vanished at the first sign of responsibility, was long gone. She had planned to resign quietly in a few weeks, find something safer, and focus on her baby. But fate had other plans. That day, Lucas Hendrix was in a foul mood. The company's latest project, a billion-dollar real estate venture, had hit delays. Investors were anxious. His temper was worse than ever. When Anna entered his office to deliver a report, she felt the tension like static in the air. Ethan, mopping just outside the glass-walled conference room, could see the storm brewing inside. Lucas's tall frame was rigid, his voice raised, though Ethan couldn't hear the words clearly. Anna's hands trembled as she handed over the documents. Then, through the clear glass, Ethan caught a glimpse of Lucas slamming his hand on the table. Papers flew. Anna flinched. The janitor paused, eyes narrowing. He'd seen that kind of rage before, years ago, in another man's eyes. His own father's, drunken, cruel, and full of power. The memory stabbed at him, but he forced himself to keep working. It wasn't his place, he told himself. He needed this job. Lily depended on it. But then something unexpected happened. The glass door swung open suddenly and Anna stepped out, wiping at her eyes. She almost collided with Ethan's mop. I'm sorry, she whispered, trying to steady her breath. Her voice was cracked, weak. Ethan looked at her for a moment, seeing the exhaustion behind her polite smile. "You okay, miss?" he asked gently. She nodded quickly, forcing composure. "Yes, just a long day already." She tried to laugh, but her voice broke. Then, almost as if the weight of her secrets was too much, she whispered, "I can't lose this job." "Not now," Ethan gave a soft nod. "Sometimes the wrong people have too much power," he said quietly. "But no job's worth your soul." Anna's eyes filled with tears, but she turned away, pretending to check her phone. Before Ethan could say more, Lucas's voice boomed from the office again. "Anna, get back here!" She froze. Fear flickered across her face. Ethan saw it, the same fear he had seen in his mother's eyes long ago. Anna straightened her shoulders, whispered, "Thank you," and walked back inside. Ethan stood still, heart pounding. Through the transparent glass, he could see Lucas pacing, shouting, his face red with fury. He saw Anna trying to explain, pointing to the documents. Then suddenly, Lucas grabbed the folder from her hands and threw it across the room. She flinched again. His gestures grew more violent. Ethan's grip tightened around the mop handle. He shouldn't interfere. That's what he told himself. People like him didn't challenge men like Lucas Hendricks. It never ended well. Still, every second he stood there doing nothing felt like a betrayal. To himself, to his daughter, to his late wife, who always told him, "If you see someone hurting and you can help, then you must." A loud crash broke his thoughts. The folder hit the glass wall, scattering papers across the floor. Ethan flinched. Anna's voice rose in panic, too faint to hear words, but desperate. Then Lucas's shadow moved toward her. The next sound chilled Ethan's blood, a sharp, sickening slap. He froze, disbelief flooding him. He looked around. The receptionist pretended to type. The security guard at the corner glanced away. Everyone heard it. No one dared move. Inside, Anna stumbled back, clutching her cheek. Lucas stood over her, shouting, his finger stabbing the air. Ethan's heart pounded louder than the billionaire's voice, and that was the moment, the split second, where fear met fury inside him. He dropped the mop. The water bucket tipped over, spilling across the marble floor like a broken mirror. His feet moved before his mind caught up. He was walking, no running, toward that glass door. Something inside him snapped. Maybe it was the memory of Sarah's bruises after a drunk driver hit her car. Maybe it was the thought of his daughter growing up in a world where monsters like Lucas went unchallenged. He didn't know. All he knew was that he couldn't stay invisible anymore. As he pushed open the heavy glass door, time seemed to slow. Lucas turned, his expression twisting from rage to shock. The billionaire, surrounded by wealth and power, stared at a man holding nothing but courage. And for the first time in years, Ethan Cole, the janitor everyone ignored, was finally seen. The room was silent except for the ticking of the wall clock. The moment Ethan stepped in, every pair of eyes turned toward him, astonished, frozen, uncertain. The billionaire, Lucas Hendricks, stood tall behind his mahogany desk, his face red with rage, his hand still trembling from the blow he had just delivered. Anna, the young secretary, stood by the corner, her cheek flushed and her eyes glassy with tears. She was shaking, one hand pressed protectively over her stomach. Ethan's heart hammered in his chest. He hadn't planned this. He hadn't even thought beyond the doorway. But now that he was inside, something fierce and immovable had taken root inside him. He looked at Lucas, and then at Anna, and for a moment all the fear that had ruled his life seemed to melt away. "What do you think you're doing?" Lucas demanded, his voice cold and venomous. "This is a private office. Get out." Ethan's voice came out lower than he expected, steady and firm. "I heard you," he said. "Everyone out there heard you. You don't have to hit her." Lucas's lips curved into a cruel smirk. "She's my employee. I'll handle her how I see fit. Now get back to your mop before I have you thrown out." Ethan didn't move. Behind him the guards shifted uneasily, waiting for the command. But something in the janitor's posture, his unshaking defiance, made them hesitate. He wasn't raising his voice. He wasn't threatening. Yet there was something powerful about the calm in his eyes, a quiet that unnerved the room. Anna tried to speak. "Please, Mr. Hendricks." "I didn't mean silence," Lucas roared, slamming his fist on the desk so hard that pens rolled and paper scattered. Anna flinched again, backing away. "You disobeyed me. I told you not to leak those documents until I approved them, and now the press is asking questions about the project delay." Anna's voice trembled. "I didn't leak anything. I just sent the investor report to the team you assigned." Lucas cut her off, stepping closer, his face inches from hers. "Don't lie to me," he hissed. His words spat like fire. Ethan clenched his fists. He'd seen that look before, arrogance fueled by power. To men like Lucas, people weren't human. They were possessions, tools, and Anna, trembling before him, was just another casualty in his empire. "Sir," Ethan said, his voice rough with emotion, "she didn't deserve that." "Nobody does." Lucas turned his glare on him. "Who the hell do you think you are? A janitor telling me how to run my business? Do you have any idea who I am?" "I know exactly who you are," Ethan replied. "A man who thinks money makes him untouchable." Lucas's jaw tightened. He was not used to defiance, especially not from someone in a blue uniform. "Security!" he barked. "Get this trash out of my sight!" But the guards still hesitated. The cameras in the corners of the office blinked silently, recording everything. Everyone knew that one wrong move here could end up viral by noon. Lucas's temper was infamous, but this was different. He had crossed a line. Anna, voice trembling, stepped forward. "Please don't," she whispered. "He's right. This has gone too far." Lucas spun around. "You dare take his side?" Before anyone could react, he grabbed her arm. She cried out in pain, clutching her belly. That was when Ethan moved. He crossed the room in 2 strides and yanked Lucas's hand away. "Let go of her!" Ethan shouted. The billionaire stumbled back a step, surprised by the strength in the janitor's grip. For a split second, their eyes met, one full of fury, the other full of fire. "You just made the biggest mistake of your life," Lucas hissed. Ethan stood between him and Anna. "Maybe," he said, "but I can live with that. What I can't live with is watching you hurt her again." The tension was electric. Outside, a few employees had gathered near the glass wall, pretending to check their phones while peering in with wide eyes. The whole floor could feel it. A clash between 2 worlds, the billionaire who ruled through fear and the janitor who had nothing left to lose. Lucas straightened his suit jacket, trying to recover his composure. "You think this makes you some kind of hero?" He sneered. "You're a nobody. You clean my floors. You don't matter." Ethan took a slow breath. "Maybe not to you, but I matter to my daughter, and what she learns from me matters. If she grows up thinking it's okay to look away from cruelty, then I've failed her." For a moment the words hung in the air like a blow heavier than any punch. Lucas blinked, caught off guard by their sincerity. Then as his pride flared again, he spat, "You'll regret this. I'll destroy you." Ethan didn't back down. "Maybe, but you'll never scare me." Lucas's temper snapped. He lunged forward, shoving Ethan hard. Ethan staggered but didn't fall. He steadied himself and raised a hand, not to hit but to stop him. "Don't do this," Ethan warned. The billionaire swung anyway. The punch landed squarely on Ethan's jaw. Pain exploded across his face, but he didn't retaliate. He wiped the blood from his lip, looked Lucas dead in the eyes, and said quietly, "You just proved who you really are." The guards finally rushed in, pulling Lucas back as Anna shouted, "Stop! Please, stop!" Her voice cracked with desperation. She was crying openly now, shaking uncontrollably. "Call an ambulance," Ethan said to one of the bystanders. "She's pregnant." The word pregnant silenced the room. Even Lucas froze, eyes widening. "What?" he muttered. Anna backed into a chair, tears streaming down her face. "I didn't want anyone to know yet," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I was afraid of losing my job." Lucas blinked, realization dawning too late. His face paled, but pride wouldn't let him show remorse. This doesn't change anything," he stammered, but his voice lacked its usual power. Ethan stepped closer, voice low but firm. "It changes everything. You hit a woman carrying a child. I don't care how rich you are. There's no excuse for that. The office door burst open as the building's HR director and two more security officers entered, alerted by the noise. The scene they walked into was chaos. Lucas disheveled and furious, Anna crying in pain, and Ethan standing protectively beside her. The cameras had caught it all. The HR director's face drained of color. "Sir," she said to Lucas, "we have everything on tape. We need to contain this before—" "Get out!" Lucas snapped, waving her off. "All of you. This is my company." But no one moved. For the first time, his authority cracked. The power he wielded so easily began to slip through his fingers. Everyone could feel it. Anna's breathing quickened, her hand clutching her stomach. Ethan knelt beside her, his voice gentle now. "It's okay. Help's coming. You're safe." She looked at him through tears. "Why did you do it?" she whispered. He smiled faintly, though his jaw throbbed with pain. "Because someone had to." Outside, the siren of an ambulance echoed faintly in the distance. The sound seemed to shatter the invisible wall of silence that had kept everyone afraid for so long. Lucas stood motionless, watching the janitor help his secretary. For the first time in his life, he was not the most powerful man in the room. The janitor, bleeding, bruised but unbroken, had taken that crown without even wanting it. As the paramedics rushed in and escorted Anna out, Ethan followed beside her, steadying her steps. The crowd of employees parted like the Red Sea. Some lowered their eyes, ashamed they hadn't acted sooner. Others whispered, their voices trembling with awe. When the elevator doors closed behind them, one thing became clear to everyone left standing on that floor. The billionaire had just met the one man he couldn't control. The elevator doors slid shut, sealing Ethan and Anna away from the chaos above. The soft hum of descent was the only sound between them, broken only by Anna's uneven breathing. Her hands trembled in her lap, still pressed protectively against her stomach. Ethan stood beside her, one hand hovering near her shoulder but not touching, respectful, steady, calm. The bruised corner of his mouth throbbed from Lucas's punch, but he ignored the pain. His concern was entirely on the frightened woman before him. "It's going to be okay," he said quietly, though he wasn't sure if he believed it himself. Anna nodded faintly, her voice barely more than a whisper. "He would have hurt me worse. If you hadn't come in." Tears welled in her eyes. "You shouldn't have risked yourself for me, Ethan." He shook his head. "You didn't deserve what happened." "Nobody does." His tone carried a quiet strength, not the bluster of a hero, but the steady conviction of a man who had spent his life fighting battles no one saw. When they reached the ground floor, paramedics were already waiting. The receptionist pointed them toward the lobby bench, where Anna sank down weakly. As the medics took her vitals and escorted her toward the ambulance, Ethan lingered behind. The weight of what had just happened began to hit him. He'd confronted a billionaire. He'd put hands on his boss. And the entire thing was probably on camera. He knew what that meant. He was going to lose his job, maybe even face charges. But somehow, as he stood in that gleaming lobby with the faint scent of bleach and expensive perfume in the air, Ethan didn't feel regret. He felt free. Upstairs, Lucas Hendricks was fuming. He paced his office like a lion in a cage, his face still flushed with humiliation. The HR director hovered near the door, unsure whether to speak. Security had tried to convince him to let the police handle the matter, but Lucas had dismissed them all. His empire was built on control, and for the first time, control had slipped. "That janitor," Lucas hissed, glaring at the elevator numbers. "He thinks he can embarrass me in front of my own staff?" His voice trembled with fury. "He's finished. I'll make sure he never works again." He slammed his fist on the desk, scattering more papers. But even as anger consumed him, a flicker of fear crept beneath it. The cameras had caught everything, and if that footage leaked, his billion-dollar reputation could crumble overnight. Meanwhile, down in the street, Ethan watched as the ambulance pulled away, sirens fading into the city's noise. He exhaled heavily, leaning against a column. His phone buzzed, a reminder to pick up Lily from school at 3. He smiled faintly. His daughter. The one reason he endured long nights and thankless work. He had promised her a simple rule. Always do what's right, even if it's hard. He had lived by it today, but the cost was still unknown. "Ethan Cole," a voice snapped from behind him. He turned to see Mr. Jennings, the building manager, striding toward him with a look of panic. "What in God's name did you do?" "Lucas is furious. He's demanding your immediate suspension." Ethan straightened. "Then I guess I'm suspended." Jennings lowered his voice, glancing around nervously. "Look, I saw the footage. You were right to step in. But you've got to understand, this isn't a fair world. People like him, they don't lose. You'll be crushed if you fight back." Ethan met his eyes, tired but unafraid. "Maybe, but at least I'll be able to look my daughter in the eye tonight." Jennings sighed, shaking his head. "You're a brave man, Ethan. Brave or foolish. I'm not sure which." "Sometimes," Ethan replied, "they're the same thing." He packed his things quietly that afternoon. The mop, the bucket, the locker filled with a spare lunchbox Lily had decorated with stickers. Every step echoed in the empty janitor's room, like a farewell. He thought about all the times he'd walked those halls unnoticed, the man everyone ignored, the one nobody would remember. Yet now, for once, people looked at him differently. A few co-workers nodded respectfully as he passed. One whispered, "You did the right thing." Another muttered, "Be careful, man. He's dangerous." When Ethan reached the main entrance, a voice called his name. It was Rebecca, a senior accountant. She looked pale, holding her phone like a secret. "Ethan," she said softly, glancing around. "The footage. It's already online." "How what?" She showed him the screen. The headline read, "Billionaire CEO assaults pregnant secretary. Janitor steps in to stop him." Below it, grainy video from the security feed showed exactly what happened. Lucas's hand raised, Anna crying, and Ethan charging in to pull him away. Within minutes, comments were flooding in. "That janitor is a hero. Fire the billionaire. Protect Anna." Ethan stared at the screen, stunned. "Who leaked this?" he asked. Rebecca gave a nervous smile. "Let's just say good people still exist in this building." She patted his arm and walked off before anyone saw. By evening, the story had spread like wildfire. News outlets picked it up. Social media blazed with outrage. Reporters camped outside Hendrix Global. The company's PR team scrambled to contain the disaster. But it was too late. The footage was everywhere. When Ethan returned home that night, Lily ran to him as always, her small arms wrapping around his waist. "Daddy, you're on TV!" She giggled, pointing at the screen. Ethan froze. The news anchor's voice filled their small apartment. A janitor's brave intervention stops corporate abuse. Public demands justice. Lily looked up at him with wide, proud eyes. "Did you save someone, Daddy?" Ethan knelt down, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "I just helped someone who needed it, sweetheart. That's what heroes do," she said. Hugging him again, her words broke something inside him, not from pain, but from the overwhelming mix of pride and disbelief. He had spent years feeling small, insignificant. Yet in his daughter's eyes, he had become something greater. But peace didn't last long. The next morning, he woke to pounding on his door. Reporters crowded the hallway, shouting questions. "Mr. Cole, did you really hit Lucas Hendricks? Do you plan to sue? What will you do now that you've lost your job?" He shielded Lily behind him, answering none of them. He didn't care for fame or revenge. All he wanted was quiet. Then his phone buzzed again, a number he didn't recognize. He hesitated, then answered. "Mr. Cole," said a calm voice. "This is Detective Ramirez, City Police. We're following up on the assault report from Hendrix Global yesterday. We need your statement." Ethan's pulse quickened. "Of course. I'll come in. And Mr. Cole," the detective added, "for what it's worth, we've seen the footage. You did the right thing." He hung up, relief washing over him. The fight wasn't over, but at least he wasn't alone. Across town, Lucas Hendricks watched the news from his penthouse, his expression darkening with every headline. His lawyers surrounded him, murmuring about damage control, public image, and potential lawsuits. Lucas slammed the remote on the table. "I'll destroy that janitor," he snarled. "He'll regret ever stepping into my world." But as he spoke, the screen replayed the footage again, Ethan shielding Anna, the look of quiet defiance in his eyes. And for the first time in his life, Lucas felt something he didn't understand, fear, because power couldn't silence truth anymore. and one man's courage had set something in motion that no amount of money could stop. The morning after the video went viral, the world outside Hendrix Global had changed. Reporters swarmed the front gates like bees drawn to the scent of scandal. Cameras flashed, microphones waved, and questions flew at every passing car. Is it true the CEO assaulted his employee? Who's the janitor hero? Where is Anna Blake now? The mighty empire of Lucas Hendrix, once untouchable, was now under siege. Overnight, his name had become synonymous with cruelty and abuse of power. But inside the marble walls of the corporation, fear and silence still lingered. Employees avoided speaking in public, afraid of losing their jobs. HR departments hid behind legal statements. Yet one man, the janitor, stood outside all of that, stripped of title but not of dignity. Ethan Cole sat on a worn wooden bench outside the downtown police precinct, holding a cup of cold coffee. He'd spent the last hour giving his statement to Detective Ramirez, the same officer who had called him the night before. The detective was patient and thorough, replaying the footage frame by frame. Each time Lucas's hand came down, Ethan's jaw tightened. Ramirez closed the file. You did the right thing, Mr. Cole, but this won't be easy. Hendrix's lawyers are already spinning the story. They're claiming it was a heated misunderstanding, that he never struck her, just an accidental push. Ethan frowned. An accident. That man knew exactly what he was doing. I believe you, Ramirez said. But in court, belief isn't enough. We'll need statements, medical reports, and witnesses willing to stand up. He leaned forward. Can we count on you? Ethan didn't hesitate. You can. When he walked out of the station, the cool air hit his face like a wave of clarity. He knew this wasn't just about Anna anymore. It was about every person who had been too afraid to speak, every worker who had swallowed humiliation to keep their job. He thought of Lily, his daughter, and the world she would grow up in. He wasn't fighting just for Anna. He was fighting for her, too. That same morning, Anna lay in a hospital bed, pale but safe. Her baby's heartbeat echoed softly on the monitor beside her. The doctor had assured her the child was unharmed, though she needed rest and protection from stress. Still, she couldn't rest. She watched the news coverage play endlessly on the small TV mounted above her bed. The words "billionaire scandal" flashed again and again. When Ethan entered the room, she looked up, tears already gathering. You shouldn't be here, she said softly. You've done enough. I haven't done nearly enough, he replied, pulling a chair beside her. The police will need your statement too. She looked away, fear flickering in her eyes. Lucas has powerful friends, Ethan. He'll destroy me. He'll destroy you. He always gets what he wants. Ethan smiled faintly, though there was no humor in it. Maybe, but even powerful men fall when truth stands against them. She stared at him for a long moment. Then slowly she nodded. I'll tell them everything. Meanwhile, inside the shimmering tower of Hendrix Global, chaos brewed. Lucas stormed through his private office, barking orders into his phone. His legal team sat pale-faced in front of him. Do you understand what's at stake? He roared. Fix this. Bury the footage. Threaten the outlets. I don't care how. One of his lawyers, a middle-aged man with trembling hands, stammered. Sir, it's too late. The video's everywhere. Even major networks are running it. Public opinion is turning. Lucas slammed his fist onto the desk. Then buy the damn opinion. He turned to his head of security. Find the janitor. I want something on him, anything. A record, debt, criminal past. There has to be something. No one ruins Lucas Hendrix, but the search turned up nothing. Ethan Cole was spotless. No criminal record, no scandals, just a hardworking single father who had spent years cleaning other people's messes. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. By afternoon, the story had evolved from gossip to movement. On social media, hashtags trended worldwide. Justice for Anna, janitor hero. Power does not equal right. People shared Ethan's story, calling him the man who stood when no one else would. Donations poured in for Anna's medical bills. Journalists camped outside the hospital, hoping for a quote. And amid all the noise, Ethan remained humble, avoiding interviews and fame. When asked by one reporter why he did it, he simply said, because someone had to. That evening, Detective Ramirez called again. "We've got the warrant," he said. "We're arresting Lucas Hendricks tonight." Ethan's breath caught. "You're serious?" "As a heart attack. The DA's office saw the footage. They want to make an example out of him. We'll pick him up at his penthouse." For a moment, Ethan didn't know what to say. He looked out his apartment window at the city lights below. Somewhere in one of those glittering towers, justice was finally knocking on the door of the untouchable. That night, as rain began to fall over the city, Lucas Hendricks opened his penthouse door to find two detectives standing there, badges raised. "Lucas Hendricks," Ramirez said calmly, "you're under arrest for assault and battery." Lucas's eyes widened. "This is absurd," he shouted as handcuffs clicked around his wrists. "Do you know who I am?" "Yes," Ramirez replied. "The man who thought he was above the law." The footage of his arrest hit the news within hours. The internet exploded with celebration. The mighty billionaire, once feared and admired, was now a disgraced criminal. But Ethan didn't celebrate. He watched the screen quietly, Lily asleep beside him on the couch. He knew the story wasn't over. Justice was never that simple. Powerful men didn't fall without a fight. But for the first time in years, he felt something close to hope. A week later, Ethan and Anna were called to testify in court. The hearing was short but intense. Lucas sat at the defense table, his arrogance replaced by hollow anger. When Anna took the stand, her voice trembled but never broke. "He hit me," she said simply. "He told me I was worthless. But someone stood up for me." She turned toward Ethan. "And because of him, I'm not afraid anymore." Ethan's testimony was brief, humble. "I didn't plan to be a hero," he told the judge. "I just saw a man hurting someone who couldn't fight back." They did what any decent human being should do. When the gavel finally struck, the courtroom exhaled. Lucas Hendricks was denied bail, pending trial. As officers led him away, he glared at Ethan, but this time the janitor didn't look away. Outside the courthouse, the crowd erupted in cheers. Cameras flashed. People shouted his name, but Ethan didn't wave or smile. He simply helped Anna down the steps, his hand steady on her shoulder. She turned to him, voice trembling with emotion. "You changed everything, Ethan." He shook his head. "No," he said softly. "We did." That night back home, Ethan tucked Lily into bed. She hugged him tight. "You're my hero, Daddy," she whispered sleepily. He smiled, brushing her hair from her face. "Real heroes don't wear capes, sweetheart. They just do what's right." And as he turned off the light, the city outside seemed quieter, softer, as if, for one night at least, justice had finally found its voice. The world slowly began to move again after the storm. The chaos of the courtroom, the flashing cameras, the angry headlines, all of it started to fade like distant thunder. But inside the quiet corners of their lives, something new was growing: peace. For the first time in months, Anna could breathe without fear. She no longer jumped at every loud noise or flinched when someone raised their voice. The bruises on her skin had faded, but it was the wounds inside her heart that took longer to heal. And through that journey, one person stood by her side without ever asking for anything in return: Ethan Cole. It had been 6 weeks since Lucas Hendricks was denied bail. The media still followed every update, but the noise was no longer deafening. The world had moved on to the next scandal, the next story. Yet for Anna, each day was a new chapter in recovery. She spent most of her time at a small community clinic, attending prenatal checkups and trying to rebuild her confidence. The nightmares still came sometimes, dark memories of the moment Lucas's hand struck her, but when they did, she remembered Ethan's voice. Calm, steady, unshakable. "You're safe now." Those words became her anchor. Ethan, on the other hand, had returned to a quieter life, but not the same one he'd left behind. Hendricks Global had publicly terminated him, though public outrage forced the company's new management to issue a formal apology and a financial settlement. Ethan refused most of it, only accepting enough to cover his daughter's education and Anna's hospital bills. The rest he donated to a women's shelter. He didn't want fame or pity. He only wanted dignity, and for his little girl, Lily, to grow up proud of her father. Every morning, Ethan walked Lily to school through the same streets he'd once cleaned after hours. The people who passed him now didn't look through him. They smiled, nodded, sometimes even whispered, "That's him." But he didn't see himself as a hero. Heroes wore masks in movies. He was just a father who couldn't stand by and do nothing. One chilly afternoon, as golden leaves swirled down the street, Ethan found himself standing outside the small cafe near the hospital, where Anna liked to sit. He hadn't planned to see her, but somehow his feet brought him there. Through the window, he saw her by the corner table, a cup of tea in her hands, her belly now gently rounded with life. She was reading a book, sunlight spilling across her face, softening the sadness that once lived there. He hesitated at the door. Part of him wanted to leave, afraid of intruding. But then she looked up and saw him, and her smile told him everything. "Ethan," she said warmly as he approached. "I was hoping you'd stop by." He smiled, taking a seat across from her. "I didn't want to bother you." "You're not a bother," she said softly. "You're the reason I'm even here to have tea in peace." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, sipping tea as the city buzzed outside. It wasn't awkward. It was quiet in the kind of way that only existed between people who had been through something life-changing together. "How's Lily?" she asked. "Good," Ethan said with pride. "She made me a drawing yesterday, me, her, and you. She called it My Family of Heroes." Anna laughed gently, covering her mouth. "She's adorable." "She is," Ethan said, his eyes softening. "She's what keeps me going." Anna nodded, looking down at her hands. "You know, I think that's what you do for people, Ethan. You keep them going." He looked at her, surprised. "I'm just trying to help." "Exactly," she said. "And that's what makes you different." Her words hung between them, heavier than silence. Outside, children's laughter echoed as the school nearby let out. For a fleeting moment, everything felt normal, peaceful. But healing wasn't just about peace. It was about facing what still hurt. That evening, Anna opened up to him in a way she hadn't before. "When he hit me," she said quietly, "I thought that was the end. Not just of my job, but of me. I'd spent so long believing my worth depended on what people like him thought of me. When you stepped in, I realized something. I realized I wasn't invisible." Ethan listened, his hands clasped. "You were never invisible," he said. "You just needed someone to remind you." Her eyes glistened. "That someone was you." There was a long pause. Neither spoke, but the air was thick with emotion, grief, gratitude, something unspoken that felt like the first spark of light after a long winter. Weeks turned into months. Anna's belly grew, and so did her friendship with Ethan and Lily. She began joining them for dinner on Fridays, bringing homemade soup or helping Lily with her school projects. The laughter that filled Ethan's small apartment during those evenings felt like medicine. Lily adored Anna, often curling up beside her to rest her head on her belly, talking to the baby. "Is it a boy or a girl?" Lily would ask every time. Anna would smile mysteriously. "You'll have to wait and see." Sometimes Ethan caught himself watching Anna as she laughed with his daughter, her face glowing with warmth. There was something about her presence that felt like home, quiet, real, healing. But he never let his thoughts go too far. She'd been through too much. She needed stability, not more uncertainty. One day, as they were walking home from the park, Anna paused and looked at him. "You know," she said, "I've been thinking. Maybe we could start something that helps people like me. Women who've been through abuse, who need protection, support." Ethan nodded slowly. "Like a shelter?" "Yes," she said, her eyes bright with hope. "A place where people can go when they think no one will believe them. A place that says you're not alone." Ethan smiled, his heart swelling with admiration. "Then we'll do it." And they did. With the help of a few kind journalists, community donations, and a small grant from the city. The Safe Haven Project was born, a modest community center that offered counseling, temporary housing, and job assistance to victims of workplace abuse. Anna became its coordinator, and Ethan, though still cleaning part-time at a local school, volunteered every weekend. Together, they turned their pain into purpose. One evening, months later, Anna gave birth to a healthy baby boy. Ethan waited outside the delivery room, nervous as if it were his own child. When the nurse finally called him in, Anna smiled through her exhaustion, holding the baby close. "Ethan," she whispered, tears in her eyes. "Meet Matthew." He leaned in, gazing at the tiny bundle of life. "He's perfect," he said softly. Anna smiled faintly. "Thank you for being here." "Always," Ethan said. "We're family now." She looked up at him, eyes shining. "Yes," she whispered, "we are." As the newborn slept peacefully in her arms, Ethan felt something shift inside him, a quiet, profound sense of belonging. The janitor, who had once been invisible, had found his place in a world that finally saw him not as the man who cleaned floors, but as the man who stood for what was right. Outside, dawn broke over the city, soft and golden. The storm was over, and in its wake there was healing, hope, and a new beginning that even the richest man alive could never buy. The morning light poured through the curtains of the small hospital room like a gentle promise. The air was quiet, soft with the rhythm of new life. Anna lay resting, her newborn son sleeping peacefully beside her in a small crib, his tiny fingers curled around the blanket. The world outside buzzed with its usual noise, but in that room, time seemed to stand still. The nightmare that had once consumed her life was now nothing more than a shadow in the distance. She had survived. She had won, and she wasn't alone. Ethan sat in a chair by the window, a cup of coffee in one hand, exhaustion and quiet joy painted across his face. He had been there all night, refusing to leave even when the nurses told him to get some rest. Every time the baby stirred, he was there, standing watch like a silent guardian. His eyes carried years of weariness, but they also carried peace, the kind that comes when a man has done what he was meant to do. Anna stirred, blinking slowly awake. When her eyes found him, she smiled. "You're still here," she murmured, her voice weak but warm. He chuckled softly. "Where else would I go?" She turned her head toward the crib, her gaze softening at the sight of her son. "He looks like his father," she whispered, then quickly corrected herself. "But I think he'll grow up to be more like you." Ethan looked away, embarrassed but touched. "Let's hope he grows up better than me," he said quietly. Anna smiled faintly. "You saved me, Ethan. You saved him. Don't ever say you're anything less than good." He didn't answer right away. Instead, he stood and walked over to the crib, looking down at the tiny face sleeping so peacefully. "You know," he said, "when my wife passed away, I thought that was it. I thought the world had taken everything good from me. I used to clean offices like Lucas Hendricks's and wonder why some people got everything, while the rest of us had to scrape by. But then," he looked up, meeting Anna's eyes, "then I met you, and I realized maybe goodness doesn't disappear. Maybe it just finds new ways to live on." Tears welled in Anna's eyes. "You gave me back my hope," she whispered. "You gave me back my voice." They shared a long, quiet moment, the kind that doesn't need words. Later that morning, Lily burst into the hospital room like a ray of sunshine. She carried a balloon in one hand and a small card in the other. "Mom says we should always bring something when we visit new babies," she said cheerfully, though the word Mom made her father's chest tighten with bittersweet emotion. Lily ran to the crib and stood on her tiptoes to peek inside. "He's so small," she gasped. "Can I hold him?" Anna laughed softly. "When you're a little older, sweetheart." Lily looked at her father and grinned. "Daddy, he can be my brother, right?" Ethan smiled. "You already have enough energy for two, kiddo." "But he needs a big sister," Lily insisted. "And I'm really good at it." Anna reached out and took Lily's hand. "Then I guess he's lucky to have you." That moment, a single father, a brave mother, a child who saw no difference between blood and love, was something sacred. A family, not bound by names or pasts, but by the simple truth of kindness. Over the next few weeks, life found a new rhythm. Ethan continued working part-time at the community center they'd built together, the Safe Haven Project. It had grown beyond anything they imagined. Volunteers from all over the city came to help. Survivors shared their stories, found strength, found work, found themselves again. The walls of the center were decorated with photos of smiling faces, women, men, children, all standing in front of a mural that read, "No one is too small to make a difference." Ethan often came home late, covered in dust and sweat. But the moment he stepped through the door, there was laughter. Anna would be feeding little Matthew, and Lily would be sitting beside her, reading a bedtime story out loud. It was a picture of peace, one he never thought he'd see again, but peace didn't come without reminders. Lucas Hendricks's trial finally began 3 months later. The courtroom was packed. The once powerful billionaire looked like a ghost of his former self, pale, sleepless, defiant yet hollow. His lawyers spoke of momentary lapses and misunderstandings, but the world wasn't buying it anymore. The footage, the testimonies, the outrage, it was all too much to erase. Anna sat beside Ethan through every hearing. She didn't flinch when Lucas's eyes met hers. For once, the fear was gone. She testified calmly, recounting the events as if releasing the last of her pain into the air. When the verdict finally came, guilty on all counts, she exhaled, tears of relief streaming down her face. The judge's words echoed like thunder. Power does not excuse cruelty. Outside, the media erupted, but Ethan shielded Anna from it, guiding her through the crowd. "It's over," he said gently. She nodded, her voice trembling. "It's finally over." Months passed. Seasons changed. The leaves fell, snow came and went, and spring returned with its quiet rebirth. One Sunday afternoon, as sunlight spilled across the park, Ethan watched as Anna and Lily chased little Matthew in the grass. The boy, barely walking, stumbled and giggled as his tiny hands reached for a butterfly. Anna's laughter rang through the air, light, unburdened, free. Ethan sat on a bench, feeling something warm and unfamiliar fill his chest. Peace, real peace. Anna turned toward him, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "You know," she called out, smiling, "you could stop sitting there like an old man and join us." He grinned, standing up. "Old man, you wound me." As he walked toward them, Lily ran up and grabbed his hand. "Daddy," she whispered excitedly, "you should marry her." Ethan nearly tripped. "Lily," he laughed, flustered. Anna overheard, her cheeks turning pink. "Out of the mouths of children," she teased. He rubbed the back of his neck. "She's got quite the imagination," Anna smiled softly. "Maybe it's not such a bad idea." The air stilled for a moment, not awkward, but charged with something gentle and real. He looked at her, and for the first time, the walls he'd built around his heart began to fall away. He took a slow step closer. "You've given me something I thought I'd lost forever," he said quietly. "A reason to believe again. And you," she whispered, "gave me my life back." They stood there in the fading sunlight, surrounded by laughter and the sound of a baby's joy. It wasn't a grand declaration, no sweeping kiss, no fairy tale ending, just two souls scarred but whole, choosing to heal together. Later that evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Ethan tucked Lily into bed while Anna rocked Matthew to sleep. He paused in the doorway watching them. The woman who had once been broken now glowed with strength. The child he thought he'd raise alone now had someone else who loved her as fiercely as he did. He smiled to himself and whispered, "We made it, Sarah, we really did." Outside, the stars began to appear one by one, quiet witnesses to a story that had begun in pain but ended in grace. The janitor who had once been invisible was now a symbol of courage. The secretary who had once been silenced had become a voice for others. And the billionaire who thought he ruled the world had learned that no amount of power could defeat truth. Ethan stepped outside, breathing in the cool night air. Somewhere inside, he knew this wasn't the end. It was just a new beginning, a single dad, a brave mother, 2 children, and a small center built from compassion. Proof that even the smallest acts of kindness could ripple out and change the world. And as the lights of the city glowed in the distance, Ethan whispered to himself, his heart full, sometimes the strongest people are the ones who simply refuse to walk away. Subscribe to Drew Daily Stories for emotional tales that prove ordinary people can do extraordinary things. Don't miss the next story that will move your heart and inspire your soul. Hit that like, share, and bell icon, because every story deserves to be heard.